FICO. Thank you. And I'm from the Church Mission Society. So do feel free to drop your details in the chat so we know who's in the room. Right, well, we've already started late, so I'll jump in and introduce Andrew. As I said, unfortunately, Andrew's camera is not working, but I shall, now just do a quick introduction on Andrew before I hand over to him. So, Andrew Barton, it's really great to have you here today. Andrew has 20 years fundraising experience as a hands-on leader at World Vision, Oxfam GB, Oxfam International, and Christian Aid. Andrew has consulted with a wide range of Christian charities since setting up Andrew Barton Consulting in 2016. He specializes in fundraising audits, fundraising strategy, and case for support work. Andrew is a trustee with oversight of fundraising at BRF Ministries and Thrive Talents UK. He is also a fundraising advisor to Church Mission Society. So I have the privilege of knowing Andrew fairly well. Andrew came to fundraising after a career in Abbey National, now known as Santander, where he held positions as varied as Director of Group Planning, Mortgage Marketing Director, and CRM Commercial Director. He has an MBA from Cornell University in the United States, where he specialized in finance and marketing. I think we can all agree that Andrew has both the fundraising and the financial experience to guide us through this session today. So over to you, Andrew, for our time looking at making the case for fundraising investment.
Thanks very much, Jora. Sorry you can't see me, but hopefully everybody can hear me okay. The plan is to try and spend about half an hour talking through some slides, which we will send around as a PDF afterwards. And then I'm very happy to take as many questions as you've got. What we are going to cover is a little bit about how you can communicate fundraising investment. We're then going to talk about the timeframes for fundraising investment and what I call the budget curse. We're going to talk about how you can avoid wishful thinking. I'm going to get across, I hope, a concept about levers and focusing on the things that really make an impact on your fundraising financially, and then talking about metrics and specifically about how you can give the finance director some early indications that things are working. But let's start by thinking about communicating fundraising investment. And I want to start by just making the point that the way that we frame investment is really important. So my little illustration here is which one of these frozen yogurts would you choose to eat? The one that says contains 20% fat or the one that says 80% fat-free? You're probably going to go for the 80% fat-free yogurt. That feels a lot healthier than exactly the same product that says it's 20% fat. And so I think some of the things with fundraising investment is just to get your framing and your phraseology right. So I'm going to suggest now 3 possible frames that might help you pitch fundraising investment. The first one is this sense of what level of investment do you need in order to maintain your income, or maybe if you're working particularly in individual giving, you might say to maintain your supporter base. Going back many years, when I was at Oxfam, probably for 2 successive years, I over-delivered on my net income contribution. In other words, taking my income minus my costs, I over-delivered on net income. But the way that we did that was just not spending enough money on acquisition. And it was a false economy, because in reality, the donor base was actually going down, and that's not going to be sufficient to maintain income. So there's a basic level of investment that you need to sustain the charity's income. And if you're not investing at that level, then you are almost certainly just going to go into a loop where you've got reducing income year on year. So the first thing to do is to get the finance team to understand that there's just a basic level of investment that you need to maintain income. The second frame is an investment frame. So to compare investing in fundraising with what happens when you invest surplus reserves. Now, I absolutely accept that you've got a basic level of reserves that you need, which have got to be held in cash. But some of you will be representing charities that actually do have more reserves than that kind of basic minimum, and you've got a charity which is investing some of its reserves in investment assets. So what I've done on this chart is I've compared CCLA's Charity Deposit Fund in the blue and its Charities Investment Fund in the orange, and those are real data points, and then I've created a likely scenario for investing in regular giving. Obviously, in the short term, we don't raise as much money in the first year as we've spent on acquisition, which is why the green line goes down. But from year 3 onwards, we've actually raised a lot more money than we would have done if we'd just been investing the surplus reserves in the market. So that's another helpful frame, particularly where your charity has got surplus reserves. And then the third frame that I want to offer is what do you do when you've got a large legacy gift? So when you get that unusually large legacy, what does the charity do and think? Does the finance director think, oh, that's fantastic news, I've suddenly got more money than I was expecting, that's more money that we can spend on the program? Or the fundraising frame is to say, large legacies come about as a result of long-standing stewardship that we've done with supporters. So let's actually reinvest a portion of that unusually large legacy in our fundraising. Can we create a designated fund that we can draw down on over time as a fundraising investment fund? Because ultimately we need those funds in order to secure the long-term future of the charity. So there's 3 frames that can help you think about how you might want to pitch fundraising investment. I'm going to move on now to thinking about timeframes, and I've called this the budget curse. And the reason that I've done that is quite simply, there are relatively few fundraising streams that will return within a year. So I always like this little cartoon. We need to end short-termism, at least until next week. And I'm sure there's a number of you that are thinking, gosh, that actually hurt slightly, because my charity is remarkably short-termist. So fundraising takes time. We plant our seedlings, and they do take a lot of time to come to fruition. And the fact of the matter is that some fundraising streams take longer to ripen than others. And many of us have got a fundraising portfolio that does have apples and pears as well as oranges and melons in it. So to completely change my analogy to the fable of the tortoise and the hare, some fundraising is like the hare. So trusts and foundations would probably be your best shot at getting a return within 1 year of starting. Maybe events might just about do that, and single gifts you might expect to get a return within a year. But most fundraising streams take longer than 12 months, and quite a few of them take a lot longer than 2 or 3 years. So if I was investing in a major donor program from scratch, I would always suggest that you should start that program on the basis that you won't receive any income for 18 months. In reality, you will get some, but just don't start off assuming that you're going to get income. Community fundraising takes time to build networks. Regular giving, it's extremely unlikely that you're going to return your initial investment within 2 years, and very often it's 3 years. And then obviously legacies, it depends on your demographics. A number of you will be representing Christian charities with aging donor bases, where it's not unusual to have an average donor age of 75 and an awful lot of 80 pluses. But then again, you might have a donor base with a lot of people in their 40s and 50s, and it's highly unlikely you're going to see any quick legacy income. Now, in reality, we've got sometimes the things that take the longest to come through have the highest return on investment, and legacies would be certainly the best example of that. But the one thing is for sure, if you are in an organization where the only thing that ever gets discussed is a 1-year budget, then you are in trouble, and it's really your job as a fundraiser to show what opportunities you're missing as a result of having this this focus effectively on 1 year income and costs. The other thing that I want to say, which I don't really want to dwell on, is when you're thinking about your fundraising income streams, it is more than time frame. You want to relate your choice of fundraising income streams need to relate back to some of the characteristics of your organization, whether it's track record, because you're going to need a track record if you're going to be credible with trusts and foundations, or whether it's the size of your donor base, which is obviously going to be crucial for any supported development activity you do. The age of the donor base is obviously going to have a massive impact on legacy income. And your network, who you know, and who are second order contacts of your trustees, key ambassadors, etc., etc. If you've got a great network, you've got much more chance of getting into trust and foundation fundraising or community fundraising. So that might be a useful little picture to have in your mind when you're thinking about your fundraising strategy. Oops. So moving on to the third area, and I do see this quite a lot, is I often see people saying, oh, we just need to test something. I've seen boards set aside some money for fundraising investment because they know that they need to grow the income in the charity, and then they get disappointed when things don't quite work out 18 months later. But I think if you sometimes think things through at the beginning, you can actually avoid investing in things which are just wishful thinking. And the main tool that I want to suggest is the what do I have to believe mantra. And this is really the power of reverse engineering your numbers. Many years ago, when I was working as a corporate strategist at Abbey National, and we were looking at acquisitions, we would use this frame quite a lot when we were thinking about what we could afford to pay for an organisation that we were looking to acquire. This "what do I have to believe" question was crucial. I want to show you just a very simple example of how this might work in practice. So imagine that you come along to your fundraising committee and you've got an idea for an insert campaign in Christian publications. The media costs are going to be 28,000 and it's going to cost you an extra 2,000 in creative and print costs. And you're going to buy 150,000 magazine inserts with that money. You can just say, oh, well, this is a test, please give me the money. Or you can, before you decide, yes, that is a great idea for investment, you can ask yourself the question, what would I have to believe to think that I could break even on spending £30,000? I want you to think about how many assumptions you think you need to make to get to that answer of what you have to believe to break even. And as you're cogitating that, I'm going to tell you the answer, and it's you need to make one assumption. And here's the answer. The only assumption you need to make is about average gift. So if you assumed that the average gift was going to be £50, you've got 30,000 of costs. So you know that you need to generate 600 responses from the campaign to break even. You know that you've got 150,000 print run. So 600 responses, 150,000 inserts, that's a 0.4% response rate to break even. And so you can simply ask yourself the question, is that likely based on benchmarked experience and what you can find out from people in the sector? And then you can take it from there. So I would really encourage you to always be thinking that, what do I have to believe question. And then the next concept that I want to try and get you to draw on comes from mechanics, and it's the idea of levers. And I know there'll be some people on the call who really struggle with spreadsheets, don't particularly like tables of numbers. If that's you, then I'm hoping that this kind of visual illustration can help a bit. So this is the idea of levers, and in essence, if you've got the longer the leverage, the more that you can shift things. So in this example, we've got the weight sitting on the end of a piece of wood. We've actually got quite a long lever here. If you had moved the little pyramid much further up to the midpoint, you wouldn't have as much leverage. Now, what's that got to do with fundraising? Well, let me just give you a specific example. If you think, let's imagine that you're wanting to invest in a program to improve your supporter journeys. What kind of return am I going to get from that investment, you ask yourself? Well, part of the answer depends on how big the supporter base is. If you've got a tiny supporter base, even if you improve the supporter journey a lot, you're probably not going to get a big return from that fixed cost of needing to invest in the supporter journey. Whereas if you've got a very large supporter base, it really will make quite a difference. And I can certainly think of Christian clients that I've had, and when I've done a fundraising audit, I can see there's definitely scope to improve the performance of the individual giving portfolio. But in reality, it's probably not the top priority just because the supporter base isn't that big. And we need to think about growing the supporter base first. If we think about the world of regular giving, which is often a key focus for Christian organisations, I want you to try and think through what you think the levers of driving up regular giving revenue are. So one lever is how much money do we ask supporters to give at the beginning. Another lever is how many of them decide to cancel their regular gift, what we describe as the attrition rate. Another lever is how many of those regular givers might agree to increase their regular gift at some point in time. Another lever is, will those regular givers make one-off gifts? And then the ultimate lever is, would they make a legacy gift? So we've got quite a few levers here. What we want to think about is which of them are the biggest levers and which of them are smaller levers. Now, in reality, attrition is sometimes a big focus. It would certainly be true to say it's a big focus for any organisation that has got a face-to-face fundraising program, because attrition tends to be higher. But one thing that gets neglected is the initial gift size. The initial gift size is probably the single biggest lever that you have in a regular giving program. And the reason that it's a big lever is because relatively few people decide to increase their regular gift from the initial gift that they make. So if you've got a regular giving program and you are setting one of your key money handles at £2 to £3 a month, then you're going to be raising between £24 and £36 a year. If your giving handle is £20 a month, it's going to be £240 a year, and those are obviously a big difference in numbers. And I want to just show you this visually. So I used to participate in an international benchmarking consortium with a number of INGOs, and this is an example of the difference that individual gift size makes. And this was comparing regular giving programs in Australia with individual giving programs in Belgium. and the lifetime value of the individual giving program in Australia at the end of 4 years was almost 3 times that of the typical lifetime value in Belgium. Now, in reality, people get very excited about attrition. It turned out that the Australian attrition was actually higher than the Belgian attrition. The big difference was that the average initial gift in Australia was $26 and the average initial gift in Belgium was $8. And that made all the difference to the value of the regular giving. So if there's one thing that you take out of this session, it's that making good decisions about the initial gift size is hugely important, and probably something that doesn't get enough attention from fundraisers in designing their programs. And finally, I just want to say a little bit about managing expectations with the finance team. And ultimately, this is about having some forward-looking metrics. So often we seem to drive our fundraising by just looking through the rear view mirror, just thinking about the management accounting numbers, what performance is versus budget and plan. Well, we'd never drive a car just looking through the rear view mirror. We'd actually want to look out the front. And that's what forward-looking metrics are all about. Now, in reality, we know that fundraising income has got lots of moving parts to it. And sometimes that can feel rather complicated. So one example, one of the more complicated income streams in fundraising is legacies. So the diagram shows some data that on how long it is typically between new pledges actually turning into legacies. And you can see that there's obviously a very long tail on the number of years after somebody makes a pledge before they die. So it's clearly subject to quite a lot of uncertainty in the first place. Then we've got the uncertainty about, well, what would the size of the bequest be? Will it be a proportion of the estate? Will it just be a one-off gift? So it can all just feel a bit too complicated, and therefore let's not do anything. But I'd like to suggest to you that the thing that you should be concentrating on is the very early stage pipeline numbers. So how many people are we having a legacy conversation with? How many people are actually putting up their hands and saying, I'm interested in finding out a bit more about that? The legacy inquiry, in other words. How many then go a bit further and tell you that they intend to leave a gift, and then how many have actually made a pledge? Now, often the only thing that seems to get measured is the number of pledges on the database, but I'd argue that the thing that you really want to be tracking is inquiries. So if you're going to invest in a gift in wills booklet and put a bit of digital advertising behind advertising it, yes, the finance director you'll never know when the income's actually going to come through, but you can say, well, we've actually had this number of people make an inquiry about legacies, and the cost of generating an inquiry was this. And then you can kind of do your, what would I have to believe numbers, and then you'll come up and go, well, actually, I think that looks like a pretty good investment. So just do think about early stage forward-looking indicators. And if you've not done very much about this, then I'd say just focus on where you are likely to be investing the most. So don't try and put forward-looking measures in for everything. Just focus on where you're likely to be investing the most money. Focus on areas where the lead times are longer, and therefore, a bit like the legacies example, where you want to try and get an early indicator, and just try and make sure that you get your early stage indicators sorted out first, rather than trying to have every single step in the process mapped out. So there we have it. 5 areas to focus on: how we're going to communicate fundraising investment and get the finance director to think about fundraising a bit differently, thinking about timeframes and communicating very clearly that different fundraising streams return over very different lengths of time. A simple tip of thinking, what do I have to believe, as a way of avoiding wishful thinking. Focus on long levers and make sure that have got some forward-looking metrics in place and you're not just relying on your management accounting data. So there we have it.